What is the difference between an individual grant application and a joint grant application? That's what we're going to be talking about today. When it comes to submitting a grant application and sort of strategizing around it, you have a choice to make before you write down one single word. And that is, are you going to be working with another organization or are you going to be doing this alone? Should you apply as joint? Should you apply as an individual? This is and will continue to be one of the most important questions that you may not be asking yourself well into the future. The reason for that is the barriers for starting a nonprofit are low. One. Two, the accountability among nonprofits is low. And three, the ability to write solid grant applications because of artificial intelligence and because of resources like this is increasing for organizations that have little experience, meaning that the playing ground is being leveled. These three reasons are giving funders a little bit of a challenge to say which organization should we really be funding, because on their end, they are also looking at multiple different factors from their donors and their constituents that mean that the word of mouth processes for some organizations, the just fund who you've always funded processes, are sort of being dropped. So this is an important topic for these reasons. This is an important trend. I'm Benjamin Dean from grantgetting.com. I hope you enjoy this video and others like it on the channel, which are aimed at helping you get more grants. So let's jump in. But before we do, let me just mention in the description of this video, there is a free resource that goes into 7 additional topics on top of the general 3 that I'm going to cover in this video to help you go deeper into this particular area of strategy. Okay, individual grant applications are probably the default for most people. You're going out there with your organization in mind. All right, so let's start there. What is the purpose of a grant application? What is the purpose of a grant? Okay, so most of the time you've got a funder or a group of funders getting together, putting their money together and saying, we want to try to solve this problem. Okay, most of the time. So when you are looking at grants, when you're doing your grant research, one of the things that this trend is sort of dictating to us then is, instead of doing our grant research with just our organization in mind, take our organization out of it for the sake of some of the research and say, what problem am I solving in the community? And what additional resources, what additional experience, skills, expertise would be helpful to me if I had it towards the end of solving this problem, towards my mission, the fulfillment of my mission. And then, are there others in my community that have that experience that could provide that to me? If so, is there a grant opportunity that we can come to together as 2 organizations that can work together towards the same end? Okay, so individual and joint, there's to make that decision of whether or not to apply individually or jointly, you need to have spent time thinking. And if there's one thing that I have seen nonprofits not do well, it is just think. Schedule time in your calendar as an executive director, as a director of development, as a program manager, as a board member. Really spend time thinking, educating yourself, learning, seeing what other organizations are doing, seeing what's working, seeing what's not. Read up on trends. Do what you're doing now. Educate yourself. There is such little emphasis placed upon not just the professional development and learning piece, but just the strategizing of how to better solve the problem that is intending to be solved in this community. That's what's needed in order to come to these variables of whether or not to apply jointly or individually. The result of that is that those organizations that are currently in this moment applying for joint applications are generally more sophisticated organizations. They are organizations where there is a more clear delineation of duties between the staff members, allowing a director of development or a grant writer and an executive director to sit back for a half a day and just think creatively, think critically. Okay. And in those moments, in that time period that you're blocking off to do that, that's when you can come to some of these puzzle pieces fitting together for your organization programmatically, which then you can bring to your grant writer, or then you have as a grant writer to go out and do more sophisticated grant research. If you're going into your research database and you're just saying, here's what my organization currently does, that's fine. That's a starting point. But where philanthropic giving to nonprofits is going is to look, of course, at more accountability in terms of the outputs and, more importantly, outcomes. But it's also going to be looking at how you're working with other organizations, how you are reducing redundancies and creating efficiencies within your community. That is an important preamble and introduction that must be considered before there's any conversation about individual or joint. But individual, let's just say if we were to categorize, and you have done this thinking and you have started to build relationships with other similar organizations that are doing work, somewhat in the direction that you are, then that's great. Then you're going to say, okay, does this grant opportunity fit better with our organization individually, or does it fit jointly with one or more organizations? And I have another video on this channel which talks about the difference between joint and collaborative. But for the purpose of this video, we'll just sort of bundle those two together in joint and collaborative. Do I do it with someone else, or do I do it by myself? So the other variable is what else is gained by doing a joint application. And there are several things that are gained. So let's say in your analysis, you have a grant that you're looking at right now, and you're saying, I think I have just about an equal chance of getting this grant if I do it myself or if I bring another organization in. I think it's about equal, or I can't really tell. It feels like about equal. There's not enough information to help me say bringing in another organization and everything that comes along with that is worth it externally. So then you have to say, are there any other intrinsic benefits that I gain as an organization now and into the future because of a joint application? Well, one thing to consider is that if you want to build a stronger relationship with another organization, a smaller joint application is a great way to do that. Okay, because you are going to be looking at maybe not a ton of reporting requirements. You're going to be looking at a chance for you to sit down and actually meet the team and work with this other team. And you could start to build that relationship, learn how each other works. Or it could be like, holy smokes, this organization is a hot mess. They put on a facade externally, but I get in there and they don't have anything together. Their meetings are a mess. They're late on deliverables. I'm glad we did a small project and not a large project, because this is an issue, right? You might find that out. Okay, so you're going to learn. There's an education there, either positively into the future or, sort of cutting your losses early. The other thing you're going to do is you are going to be looked at favorably by that funder. Okay, and that is, to hearken to the earlier point, this is the direction that funding organizations want to go. They want to see nonprofit organizations working together. So even if you would have received the max amount on a grant if you would have done something individually, doing it collaboratively with one or more other organizations, that's going to help you stand out. even if it's not clear on the rubric. However, I will say one of the two newest additions to the rubric is, of course, DEI related topics on the rubric, and then the collaborativeness of a particular grant application. So let's say that you have a grant application that totally makes sense for you to do yourself, but there is a point or two in that rubric directing the reviewer to score how collaborative the grant opportunity is. There are ways to have an individual grant application be collaborative, okay? And that is by having a partner who is going to do work that is related to your work and that you will depend on in order to achieve the outputs or outcomes, but doesn't need to actually receive funding, or in some cases can't because they're already fully funded to do that thing. That's a great opportunity. And you will find some of these opportunities actually at municipalities, cities, townships, county organizations, regional organizations. There are grants within those organizations that they receive that are multi-year. So in a multi-year grant, there are organizations that kind of have the game plan for year 1 or 2, but you get to year 3 or 4 and they need more outputs. They need more outcomes. Okay. That I've seen before in the past where you have, say, a county level organization that has received a grant 3.5 years ago, and it's a 5-year grant. So they've got a year and a half left on that particular grant, and they have specific outcomes and outputs that they need to achieve. Now they're looking ahead and saying, oh, we're not really on track to do that. We can't receive more money because we have articulated that this project, the staff is fully funded, but we have to get out there and we have to do something else with the staffing, with the resources we have. Those are awesome opportunities to bring them in terms of a letter of support, bring them into the project plan, bring their testimonials in, bring in whatever you can into your individual grant application and make it extremely collaborative without having to share the responsibilities of reporting, without having to share the responsibilities of receiving the money. That's not really a responsibility, but in some ways it is. Okay, so that's one way to think about this general topic as well. Okay, individual grant applications, great and effective for smaller projects where you've got community groups, you've got civic organizations, you've got local businesses that don't want to deal with joint applications. They just, or I would even say corporate, sometimes corporate organizations. They just want to give their money away to organizations that they know are going to use it really well. They're less sophisticated in some sense. That's individual grant application. And of course, individual grant applications, you can compete at higher levels, state, regional, federal. You can do that individually if you're at that point. But all things being equal, if you have the opportunity to work together strategically with a sound organization, you really want to investigate that. And that's a joint grant application. So in most joint grant applications, you're going to have one entity that receives the money and one or more entities that are sub-awardees. The entity that receives the money usually interfaces with the funder, and so that's something to consider, whether or not you want that. And in addition to that, they're going to be the organization that is ultimately responsible for the project. Okay, so if you are looking at a grant and you think it's a really good opportunity for you as an organization, but you don't know if you're set up right now to be the ringleader of one or more other organizations, there is nothing wrong with you bringing that grant opportunity to an organization and saying, what do you think? Do you want to work together on this? We think you should be the lead, right? We think you should be the one receiving the funding, developing the strongest part of the relationship with the funder, and holding us all accountable in some sense of getting our reporting together for you and actually doing what we're doing, right? You can do that as well. Joint applications are the way of the future. Collaborative applications are the way of the future. So this really does kind of come down to always having this in your mind when you're doing the research. Okay, the decision between an individual or joint application, it does depend on the project size. It depends on the strength, the already established strength of your partnerships, and it depends on the funding needs of the actual project. You could have a very large project with very minimal funding needs. You could have a very small project with nothing funded. You need to fund 100% of it, right? And depending on that funder, that's where you're going to start to look at these different variables and piece this together. If the project is very extensive and would benefit from combined experiences, that's one way to start looking at joint. If it's more focused, if it is typically a smaller grant, and you're looking at, just sort of continuing what you're doing with some amendments, individually is probably the best choice. Okay, so hopefully this gives you some tips. Check out the free download in the description for more tips. There's a linked comment if you have questions on a specific grant in a specific situation that you want some answers on in thinking about individual or joint. Pop it in the comments and I'd be happy to help. So thank you for jumping into this video and look forward to seeing you in the next one.